Hi everyone, this week we'll talk about sensation. So this means five senses. So firstly, let's go with what is sensation and what is the difference between sensation and perception. In general, sensations are the passive processes of bringing information from the outside world into the body and to the brain. If we were together now in the class, I would ask you how we are bringing that information from outside into the body and the brain, and most probably you would answer me with and through sensory neurons. You remember, I guess. And perception is the active process of selecting, organizing, and interpreting the information brought to the brain by the senses. And here I will ask you, and I want you to answer under the comments part. Which hemisphere is responsible for interpreting this and organizing this information brought to the brain by the senses? Where does this perception take place in brain? I want you to answer this question, okay? Okay, let's go on with the general nature of sensation. Firstly, we should define the stimulus. You know stimulus. This is something triggering our attention, and it can be measured in a variety of ways, including its size, duration, intensity, or wavelength. And a sensation occurs anytime a stimulus activates one of your receptors. For example, touching something hot. Okay? So it triggers, it activates my receptors, my sensory neurons. And here the stimulus is the hot thing that I have touched. Okay? The sense organs detect any change in energy, such as light, heat, sound, and physical pressure. Okay, sensation occurs when special receptors in the sense organs, eyes, ears, nose, skin, taste buds, are activated, allowing various forms of outside stimuli to become neural signals in the brain. So this process of converting the stimuli that is coming from outside, such as for example light, into a neural activity is called transduction, which will be a fill-in-the-blank question in your final exam. Okay, so where do vision, hearing, and all of our other senses happen? The answer is simple. They are happening in our brain. That is, the physical energy in the environment is detected by the eyes, ears, etc., by our sense organs, but we cannot see, we cannot hear, we cannot complete that sensation stuff until the brain interprets them. For example, make sense of them. So in a way, we see, hear, smell, touch, etc. in the information coming from outside world should be transmitted through our sensory neurons to our brain, and afterwards the perception happens, and afterwards we come to the end point of seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, anything. Okay, this is the last step of it. Okay, now we'll talk about sensory adaptation. We sometimes call habituation to adaptation. They are interchangeably used, and adaptation is a part of everyday experience. It's a decreased responsiveness to stimuli due to constant stimulation. Most probably you have felt that you enter a classroom and it smells very bad, but after a point, after a threshold, you will notice that you don't anymore take that smell. You don't smell it anymore. So this is adaptation. If you are exposed to a certain stimuli outside of the body, in the outer world, constantly, after a point, your responsiveness to that specific stimuli will decrease, and we call this adaptation. And once your senses get used to a new level of a stimulation, they respond only to deviations from it. Let's say you adapted to that bad smell, but afterwards there became a deviation in the frequency and the intensity of that stimulus. Let's say you opened the windows and some fresh air came, so there became a deviation in the frequency and intensity of the bad smell, and afterwards smelling that bad smell, but now I noticed that some fresh air is coming in. Okay, and here are some examples for adaptation. For example, your eyes eventually adjust to a darkened movie theater. At first you see blackness, but eventually you can see what's going on around you. And when you first jump into a pool that feels cold, your body reacts to the stimulus. Oh, it's cold, but eventually your body adapts to it and you become comfortable. And when you first walk into a sports locker room, the smell is almost nauseating, and afterwards your senses adjust and you can hardly tell how it smells. Okay, do you have any examples of adaptation you have been experiencing or you have just recently experienced? If you can share, we'll be glad, of course. Okay, now we'll go through the types of sensations. Let's first start with the visual sensation. Okay, as you can guess, vision is the most studied of all of our senses. It is the most dominating sense. The basic parts of eye that you need to know, or maybe you already know, are cornea, iris, retina, optic nerve, and pupil. And our eye is stimulated by various wavelengths of light. The different wavelengths are responsible for the diversity of colors we see. There are many other types of waves that our eye cannot detect. Light is an electromagnetic radiation that travels in the form of waves, okay? And it is emitted from the sun, stars, fire, and light bulbs, and most other objects just reflect light. Maybe you will remember these from your physics class. Okay, the structure of the human eye is as you see. Okay, how does vision occur? Firstly, light waves enter the eye through the cornea, a transparent protective structure at the front of the eye, and behind the cornea is the pupil, and the opening in the iris that regulates the amount of light entering the eye. Light then, as you see, enters the lens, and it's a flexible, elastic structure in the eye that changes its shape to focus light on the retina. And light then hits the retina and the innermost coating of the back of the eye, as you see. And afterwards, the light energy is then turned into neuronal impulses, which are sent down the optic nerve. This is the nerve that carries impulses from the retina to the brain to achieve hearing, seeing something. And to go on with the sense of seeing, we should know about the roles of sensory receptor cells. There are two types of sensory receptor cells which are located on the retina. These are rods and cones. And rods enable us to see black and white, and cones enable us to see the colors. Okay, a fill in the blank question. And let's briefly talk about dark adaptation. Actually, dark adaptation occurs as the eye recovers its ability to see when going from a brightly lit state to a dark state. This means the brighter the light was, the longer it takes the rods to adapt to the new lower levels of light. And when going from a darkened room to one that is brightly lit, the opposite process occurs. The cones have to adapt to the increased level of light, and they accomplish this light adaptation much more quickly than the rods adapt to darkness. Okay? And these are some common visual defects. Maybe you already know about myopia, nearsightedness, hypermetropia, farsightedness, astigmatism, etc., colorblind, partially colorblind, color blindness, etc. These are common visual defects. And we will now go through hearing sensation. You don't need to memorize these parts, and the ones in the eye or in other senses, these are like the duties of doctors. So if you don't want to have any expertise in some biopsychology, you don't need to memorize these parts, okay? But of course, we need to know that we have an outer ear, we have a middle ear, we have an inner ear, okay? Hammer, anvil, these are important, of course. Ear canal, ear flap, eustachian tube, cochlea, but you should have already seen them in high school. So this is also something that we need to know in our daily life. But I don't ask you to memorize, yes, this shape is anvil, etc. But you should have a general knowledge on this. Okay. Hearing depends on vibrations in the air called sound waves. For seeing, we were referring to light waves. Here we are referring to sound waves. Sound waves from the air pass through various bones until they reach the inner ear, which contains tiny hair-like cells that move back internal or outer ear, middle ear, and inner ear. Okay, you saw in the previous shape. External ear is responsible for gathering sound energy and amplification of sound pressure. And middle ear is responsible for transmitting acoustic energy from ear to the cochlea. And inner ear is responsible from the transformation of mechanical waves, that is sound, into electrical signals, which are neural signals. When we are talking about electrical chemical signals, we are referring to neural signals. Okay. And let's talk about transduction in the ear. Sound waves hit the eardrum, then anvil, then hammer, then stirrup, then oval window. Everything is just vibrating. And then the cochlea vibrates, and cochlea is lined with mucus called basilar membrane. In basilar membrane, there are hair cells. When hair cells vibrate, they turn vibrations into neural impulses, which are called organ of Corti, and they are sent up to the thalamus by auditory nerves in order to result in hearing something. Okay, this is our smelling sensation. You can just examine the shape. And smell depends on sensory receptors that respond to airborne chemicals. In humans, these chemoreceptors are located in the olfactory epithelium, a patch of tissue about the size of a postage stamp, located high in the nasal cavity. The olfactory epithelium is made up of three kinds of cells: sensory neurons, each with a primary cilium, supporting cells between them, and basal cells that divide regularly, producing a fresh crop of sensory neurons to replace those that die. Okay? And these are some disorders of olfaction, smelling sensation. You can examine them. I won't ask these, but if you want to know, you can know. These are very detailed information, I think, for counselor candidates. But maybe you should know anosmia. This is inability to smell. Would be great to know this anosmia, but the other ones are a bit detailed. And now taste sensation we'll go through. It is also called gustatory, and we have bumps on our tongue called papillae. You have heard about it, I think, before. Taste buds are located on the papillae. They are actually all over the mouth. Your tongue and the roof of your mouth are covered with thousands of tiny taste buds. When you eat something, the saliva in your mouth helps break down your food. This causes the receptor cells located in your taste buds to send message through sensory nerves to your brain, and your brain tells you what flavors you are tasting, okay? It's a long process. And we have 5 basic tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. And we have our sense of touch. This is skin sensation. You know, the skin is the largest organ of our body, and it performs many important biological functions, while also providing much of what is known as sensual pleasure. Do you know, maybe when you were a child, were you just touching yourself, or you're asking your friend to do it? This is something liked very much, right? And our sense of touch is controlled by a huge network of nerve endings and touch receptors in the skin known as somatosensory sensory system. This system is responsible for all the sensations we feel: cold, hot, smooth, rough, pressure, tickle, itch, pain, vibrations, and more. And you most probably will have a fill-in-the-blank question about the responsibilities of somatosensory system. And we have 3 layers in our skin. The outer layer is epidermis, and intermediate level is dermis, and there are also deep layers of subcutaneous adipose tissue. You should know epidermis, dermis, and deep layers of tissues, okay? And when we check the functions of sensory functions, there are factual experiences like pressure and pain, and also you can have some thermal experiences like warmth and cold. Also, through pain receptors, you feel the pain, and these are probably the most important for your safety, because they can protect you by warning your brain that your body is hurt and that you need to get some caution to prevent it. And generally, pain motivates us to tend to injuries, to restrict activity, and to seek medical help. It teaches us how to avoid pain-producing circumstances in the future. And sometimes some people may have chronic pain. This is like a pain that persists for 3 months or more. and mostly low back, headache, and rheumatoid arthritis pains are referred to as chronic pains. This is the end of our topic. Actually, we covered 5 senses. You should know the general responsibilities of these senses, but I won't get into too much detail, and I'm not expecting you to know all of the details, but you should generally know general parts of sensations, sensory organs, and the systems I have mentioned throughout my presentation. And here comes my question: why do you think it is important to know the topic of sensations for psychological counselors? What will you do with this in the future, with this knowledge in the future? What do you think about it? And if you find it unnecessary, then please state this reason. Okay, it's also acceptable. Thank you. Take care. Stay healthy. See you soon. Face to face, I hope.